So, dear ladies and gentlemen, we would like to welcome you to the main stage. Please take your seats in the main hall because in a second, KIEF International Economic Forum is going to start.
Шановні пані та панове,
Dear ladies and gentlemen,
Шановні пані та
Dear ladies and gentlemen, we're about to start our event, so please take your seats.
шановні пані.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, the Prime Minister of Ukraine, Denis Shmyhal. To announce Ukraine as an independent democratic state. KIEF International Economic Forum. Our everyday world is changing. The climate, technologies, habits, all of that has been transformed dramatically. Something that used to be impossible yesterday has become everyday actions today. The revelations, wars, pandemics, the buildings of the new states and the die-outs of empires, all are those the changes that disrupt the everyday reality and transform the way our planets and our essence look like. But let us be honest, all of that has been in the past and it will still exist in the future. But what has changed actually? We have now received the data in real time. We can physically use the inventions that have been created just a couple of months ago. The concentration of the events per one moment of time has been decreased by 20 compared to 20 years ago, not even speaking about the centuries. But every one of us takes the changes in a different way. And how does the global changes have been reflected by the Ukrainian society? We have made a research in the cities with a population higher than 50,000 people, and this is the reaction for the global change. 35% of the population of Ukrainian cities are being scared of the speed of the changes. 33% do know how to answer this question. 32% are not afraid of the speed of change. 49% of people believe that they will have enough strength to adapt to all of the changes happening. 23% are afraid that they will not have enough power to do that. 27% are scared that there will be reigned by robots in the future, and 55% do not care about that issue. 73% believe that the development of society is impossible without the development of technology and innovation. Speaking about the artificial intelligence that will have the capability of its own consciousness is interesting for 58% and is disturbing for 35%. 10% say that they have no emotions towards artificial intelligence. 9% of people are scared of that. 41% of Ukrainians are scared that technologies and robots will replace them at their jobs. 49% of Ukrainians are not worrying about that. Yes, we understand that with engaging the rural population, we will have quite different results, but still, urbanization continues. And currently, the city population is 68% of all of the population. Anyway, there's always a choice. We either can reflect, trying to preserve the past, or we can use the change to transform the reality. The important for us to understand changes are inevitable part of life. Throughout the whole humanity history, the conformists have always been against the change. They were afraid of lightning, fire, steam cars, automobiles, planes, computers. They are tremendously scared of artificial intelligence and 5G. They are afraid of uncertainty. But still, the society always has the group of people who are responding to changes and challenges, who see the opportunities where others do not see those. Those are the entrepreneurs. The volunteer movement in Ukraine has been unprecedented. The greatness of America in 20th century, Spanish Empire during Columbus time, the economic miracle of Germany and Japan are inevitable without the entrepreneurship. Our society needs more entrepreneurs who treat changes as opportunities but not as misery. The more entrepreneurs we have, the higher adaptation of the society to change. And how does our society treat entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs? Do you believe it's prestigious to be an entrepreneur? 35% of people believe it's prestigious to be the entrepreneur of a small business. A middle business, 54%. 82% believe it's very prestigious to be the entrepreneur of big business. 41% of respondents believe that the society has a positive attitude towards small businesses. 45% to middle businesses and 34% to big businesses, to large. The very same tendency is about the trust. 44% trust small businesses, 44% middle businesses, 31% trust large businesses. The dynamics of the trust year by year, Ukrainians have improved their attitudes towards big businesses. Starting from 2018 to 2021, the trust has increased by 11%. In the same time, the trust to small businesses has decreased by 21% and has decreased by the middle range as well by 11%. 69% of respondents have have said they would like to open their own businesses. 15% of people did not want to become entrepreneurs. 5% have already outlined they are already entrepreneurs on their own. Starting from 2013 in Ukraine, we see the sustainable trend of people who would like to start their own businesses. But in the same time, the amount of people who are already entrepreneurs is not increasing. The absolute majority have the experience of the different level of entrepreneurs at their own close circle. So we see the great potential of accepting the change, and people are starting to treat the opinion of being an entrepreneur better. Ukraine can turn out to be the desired land that gives the opportunity for the people who would like to change the world, or it can be the one who's moving, inertiously moving behind the leader. So who we are and where are we heading to? It doesn't matter what is going to be around the world. Without answering those fundamental questions, it will be really hard for us to focus on the most important thing, especially moving through the dramatic changes. We only can respond to challenges, and only we can respond to those questions. Postscriptum. The images that we offer to our children will identify their future and define their future. Carl Sagan. There are some words that used to have a negative sense to it, but right now it is very relevant in the times of the dramatic change. Ideology. The creation of the new paradigm of economic development is irreplaceable with it together creating the ideology of economical patriotism in Ukraine. If we want to create the foundation for the economical growth, our state needs to change its opinions toward entrepreneurship. We have to systematically cultivate and nourish the foundation of the positive treatments toward entrepreneurship. Business and the state has to do a lot of educational work in schools and in universities, promoting the philosophy and images of entrepreneurship, and at the same time creating the growth infrastructures, incubators, accelerators, funds and R&D centers. We need to have a systematic policy in the media to depict the victories of Ukrainian entrepreneurs. We have to show that coordinated work of Ministry of Education, Economy and Culture to show the opportunities for all of the people in Ukraine, especially for the youth. We already see the foundation of these actions. The launch of the new state services, creation additional incentives and industrial parks. All of those changes have been made by people who came from entrepreneurial environments. But if we would like to see the different change, the state needs the following of entrepreneurship. This world will be constantly changing and transforming. There is only one strategy to win, and accept the changes and use it for the benefit of people on behalf of Ukraine.
My name is Nick Gowing, and as you can see, the world in the age of sweeping changes. That's what we're going to be looking at for the next half hour with the Prime Minister. And then we're going to be moving on to a panel to discuss the economy of the 21st century, an era of changes, but also opportunities. Let me invite the Prime Minister, please, up onto the platform, and then we can get going. What I'd like to do is invite you as well to use Telegram, the bot, which you've been... good morning. Good morning. Welcome. Do you have your earpiece in? Okay. You need for the translator, I think.
I need no translation.
Okay, that's good. That's good. We're going to talk for about half an hour, the Prime Minister and I, about the challenges for Ukraine, and then we're going to pick it up on the economy more broadly. Certainly the way the international community is looking at the enormity of what is happening. Who are we and where are we heading? I'm doing a project about thinking the unthinkable, and we're very much in that stage at the moment of wondering what on earth is coming next. Prime Minister, let me start if I may. Where is Ukraine at the moment? Because economically you're struggling on multiple fronts. As the IMF, the World Bank and the EU confirm, there's disappointment that you have not achieved more and you're not in sight of achieving more. The World Bank says that Ukraine is suffering from subpar growth. This is the third time I've come to this forum when there has been optimism. But clearly the financial institutions are not impressed.
Доброго дня.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, dear friends, dear colleagues. It's a pleasure for me to be here at this forum. And yes, of course, today we have a lot of topics that we would like to discuss today, and we would really like to talk about the challenges and about the perspective, about the future, about the achievements that Ukraine has had, maybe about some of the failures that we can still work on. So we have to be honest in talking about all of that, and we understand that the state, it is important to have the dialogue with businesses, to have the feedback, to have this connection and this feedback on informational exchange of where to go to, what strategies to build on. So basically answering this question, where Ukraine is right now, what were the disappointments and what were the hopes for our partners and what are the expectations of Ukrainian businesses? I think we should outline the following. Ukraine is constantly transforming in the fastest pace. And by the way, the partners may not have the time to understand what kind of a fast steps our state has done in all of the areas, starting from fighting corruption to digitalization and introducing the new technologies and fighting the economical crimes that have been voiced out at one of our previous meetings at this SME forum that we've had in Unit City last year. So I do believe that those are very important things, the communicative wise. And today in this introductory video, you can see some of the results of the surveys of whether the society is ready for the fast changes. The part of society is ready, the part of society is not. But of course, we need to have the high intensity communication with our partners, with businesses, between all of us, so that we will understand and have a coordinated movement forward. Speaking on international partnerships, we have been productively collaborating with the international financial organizations. There's a lot of challenges we have to face. The first challenge is the pandemic, of course. We also have the challenge of economical crisis and the overall world economical challenges, the really fast inflation that we see all over the world, the economical and financial risks rising. So, of course, in this atmosphere, we will keep on moving, as I've already said, quite intensively, but in the same time, we're moving together with our partners. So basically, today, when we're going to be finalizing the work with the International Monetary Fund on preparing the memorandum on continuation of our collaboration, we have very intensive dialogue with the World Bank, and we have a lot of projects and really good prospects for the next years to come. Just to
Can I drill down into some of the detail of what they are saying? The World Bank talking about subpar growth, slowing reform momentum has undermined investor confidence and delayed financing from international institutions. You've got 5 billion of IMF promises, but that had to be frozen this year because things are simply not moving fast enough. What do you say to that? Because when you told Reuters a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, just before the IMF visit, we have now fulfilled all our conditions, and you expect the next $750 billion tranche to be agreed by December. Is that going to happen?
We are moving as fast as never before. That's an answer. That's a very complex answer. And there is one thing that I have to say about that. The key question is whether Ukraine shows the most important macro indicators. If we are fulfilling those macro indicators, yes, we have gone through the budget of last year. We have decreased the deficiency of the budget, and we're decreasing it for this year and the next year. And those are the key indicators for the macro budget. Our key collaboration with our partner is we are receiving the tranches when we need it. We're collaborating with IMF, we're collaborating with the World Bank, we're collaborating with the European Investment Bank, with the EBRD, with all of the partners.
Then, Prime Minister, but is that going to produce money? Is it going to produce 750 million by December, which is what you said 3 weeks ago?
Before this kind of things, money loves silence. So everyone loves that. I'm not a superstitious person, but basically I would like to repeat it once again. We have very productive dialogue. The mission is ongoing right now, and I have no mandate to make any kind of statements on that today. So please do not ask me the provocative questions at this stage. Let us talk about pragmatic things. We're working with IMF, we're working with the European Commission, and we have some positive statements on the possibility of receiving of the macroeconomical help and support. In the recent, I can't say days, I'll say say, weeks. And of course, we have a very positive collaboration with IMF. We have fulfilled all of the macroeconomical indicators. And when I've said that we're moving intensively fast, I was speaking on our reforms. Because just this July, we have approved more than 12 draft laws that have been included in the memorandum of IMF, even those that Ukraine hasn't improved in previous years.
The World Bank and the IMF don't fully understand what you're doing, because they did commit to 5 billion, but then they withdrew it and said it's suspended.
Вони дуже добре розуміють.
They understand clearly what we are doing. We are in very tight communication with them. And I would like to emphasize, and I would like to repeat it once again, the dialogue with the IMF is constantly ongoing. So we have this understanding that currently crisis all over the world that has been caused by the pandemic, of course, it requires leadership from all of the governments, requires maybe non-ordinary decisions. And sometimes the financial institutions are lagging behind this thinking. They are not used to this dramatic pace of change that we, by the way, has mentioned in the video. But there's a lot of changes that have to be done. Let us discuss it in order. The first things, and I will say what are the main challenges that Ukraine now sees for our joint understanding. The IMF, World Bank, we will talk about that. I don't really like talking about that because there's a lot of provocative questions about that. The collaboration with IMF is prolonged. There's no $5 billion. The World Bank doesn't give us money. The World Bank is the second biggest investor in Ukraine that has provided the line with $13 million of loans that have been already 10 out of those have been collected, and we would like to have 1 or 2 billion in the next years to come. The World Bank is second after the IMF, one of the biggest creditor of Ukraine. We have a close collaboration with the European Investment Bank, with the World Bank. We have signed the 2 agreements for more than $400 million 2 weeks ago, when the vice president of the World Bank has been visiting Ukraine, and we had a very productive negotiation. We have communication with European Investment Bank for more than 7 billion. We have signed up the agreements and tranches have been delivered. So Ukraine works on that. So we have a very adequate collaboration with the international financial institutions. Those $2 billion that have been provided to IMF as the the no-refundable aid, and that has been actually divided between all of the income that the IMF...
Debt here, Prime Minister. You're spending 7% of your GDP in the first half of 2021 for 11 billion. You're spending the same again for the second half. Huge payouts for the next 19 years. What they're saying is you are borrowing money at a very high rate, which is actually making development of your country much more difficult.
Абсолютно правильне питання.
That's a very clear question, even though it slightly takes us sideways from the thing that I was saying. But Ukraine has been borrowing under high rates before, and the debt pressure is really high. The guaranteed state debt of Ukraine is slightly more than $90 billion, if we will speak on dollars, and the pressure is quite high. But what are we changing? What are we doing? We're changing the structure of this debt. We have a strategy, we have a plan every year, this year, next year to come, on changing the structure of the state debt. So we're increasing our domestic debts, and we are decreasing the foreign debt. And in the same time, we are loaning the rate of the cost of the capital that we borrow year by year. So basically, if this year we have already seen this decrease by 6% already in dollars, and in hryvnia we see the decrease, the credit that we engage from the international financial institutions. So basically, it's not just about debts. We have even a lower rate there, a rate of interest there. So we're trying to decrease this rate every year to come, and we would like to have some savings from that.
The observation that easy access to expensive debt is actually slowing down your reform agenda.
Хороше питання.
That's a good question, I would say, and this is a question that in many cases the business has asked as well, that the access to capital is quite complex and the capital is expensive because of that. What does the government offer in this part? And by the way, that has been the initiative of the president starting from his electoral campaign, and 2 years after his presidency, we have been done a lot in order to make the capital cheaper. Of course, as we're speaking about the SMEs, we have introduced the 579 program that has been very successful, and 70 billion hryvnias we have supported and restructured the credits and restructured the loans for the investment needs of SMEs, and of course it has revived the markets. We are introducing a lot of investment money, more than 100 billion hryvnias for the big construction project, which also revives the businesses, the both small and medium, in the infrastructural construction. When the localization is increasing and speaking on the roads, we have more than 50% of capitalization in the concrete roads. We're speaking about 85% of localizations of income bridges. That's 90% of localizations of all of the jobs and money. So all of the things that create a very good multiplicator and create additional jobs, and they fulfill the economy with finances, because this multiplicator, it is working. And the greatest evidence to that would be the 4%, just the 4%, even though the World Bank has forecasted 12% decrease and downfall through the pandemic last year, and the really fast restoration that we expect to happen this year, we accept plus 4%, even again, despite the forecasts that have been provided by our international partners. So that is why...
Sorry?
Let me try the question in a different way.
Okay.
The IMF says that Ukraine is 15 years behind Poland. The World Bank, in a new publication, says at current growth rates, it would take 55 years to catch up with Polish living standards. 1 in 5 in your country are still suffering from poverty. And the World Bank says that there have been many achievements, but the reform agenda remains unfinished. Institutional gains look fragile. The state footprint remains large. Reform implementation has been slow, selective, and or incomplete in key areas: anti-corruption, banking, health, energy, and land markets. In other words, these are very chilling assessments. Do you say that they are exaggerated or not correct?
When 4 weeks ago we have been to the Economical Forum to Poland, and together with the Prime Minister of Poland, we have had the presentation there when we had a lot of negotiations and meetings there. One of the key comments about Poland from the international partners and IMF was the uncompleted judicial reform in Poland, and that was that complaint that the European Union and the European Commission has now provided to Poland. Why have I mentioned that? Because when we compare Ukraine and Poland, when we're starting to use the analysis of our international partners, we should consider the problematics that exist in every specific country. And I would go actually on responding to what is our movement forward. We have approved that during summer, and we are continuing approving the draft laws on reforming our justice system. We have approved a really complex laws, and we have provided a lot of reforms to the markets that haven't been possible in Ukraine throughout the last 30 years. So the evaluation of the IMF and the World Bank, it will be provided to us then when we will receive the tranches. And I would like to assure you that it will happen in the closest time this year. And that would be the best evaluation and the answer to the questions that you have set. Because we have approved all of the laws that are needed to the judicial reform, to the anti-corruptional reform. We have approved all of the needed legislation that is needed for the implementation of the corporate management reform. We have started the privatization processes and provided it through auctioning procedure, which is very important as well, because Ukraine has shown its capitalization. Just one hotel in the center of Kiev that we expected to sell it at a level of $20 million, it has been sold by $40 million. I think Hotel Dnipro, everyone has heard, it was costing one of them more than 1 billion hryvnias. So that is also about reforms, and it's again getting state out of influence the economy by still keeping the leadership of the government and the state through going through the challenges in the world. Because right now we should not forget that the challenges to our challenges and the requests from our partners are really high, and we are really trying and to follow those things that the civilized countries has been gaining through the decades. Ukraine is on war right now. Ukraine has a part of the occupied territories. Everyone knows that, but we should make sure that our international partners will not forget that as well. Ukraine has its support on those issues as well, but it takes a lot of resources. It just the expenditures for the military budget is around 6% in Ukraine. Holland is really proud that their expenditures on the military budget and defense budget is 3%, which is higher than 1% than the overall level on the European countries that have only 2%.
Prime Minister, let me move on to another critical issue, energy. You have committed to inform society, quote, on a daily basis about the state of preparation and problematic issues. Gas prices have gone up 10x in the last few weeks. You know what the Russian president said yesterday. That has eased considerably the prices. Yet there remains a significant challenge, and you've been wrong-footed by the new deal between Hungary and Russia for supply, which is going to dramatically reduce your transit fees. What is your reading at the moment about how secure energy supplies are going to be through this coming winter, given that in many parts of the world, people are being told your energy costs are going to rise enormously because of the wholesale price, but you've given a commitment that there'll be no change in prices here in Ukraine?
Дякую. Дуже серйозно.
Thank you very much. It's a very serious topic. We are now experiencing this energy crisis, and we have seen that the world scale of the energy crisis, Europe has now faced the price of gas that is setting out new records on a daily basis. It's even interesting to follow that. It's not about the economy on those prices on gas. The countries are already starting to search they're starting to search some kind of alternative ways of getting out of this energy crisis. Speaking on Ukraine, what's happening inside of Ukraine right now? As I've already said, we're really fast in reforms, and this year Ukraine lives with a newly launched gas market. Of course, we would like to set out the electricity market as well. This is an important thing. That is something that will take down the corruption and something that will provide us with the right economical basis for the state. But it happened that the introduction of the gas market in Ukraine has happened in the year of the biggest in history, I would say, the biggest history. We have already the prices for the futures for more than $1,900, as far as I remember. That is a challenge for our country, of course, but in our storages we have enough gas, more than 90 BCM, which basically we understand that it's enough for us to go through the season. We understand that the alternative energy, nuclear energy, are an important in Ukrainian system right now. At this winter, we will have 50 new nuclear units working, and we will definitely provide the electricity for our country. We have signed up the memo, and we are fulfilling the memo on green energy, as we have the representatives of these businesses here. That we had a long discussion, more than 6 months of mediation. We have signed the memo, and right now we understand that the green bonds issuing will happen by Ukrenergo. The old debts will be closed. We will pay it off. We'll not create the new debts. The market is financially balanced. We have already started the financial PSO with Energoatom and with Ukrenergo, and those are important messages because we understand that we're balancing the energy market. We're balancing the energy market overall. We understand that we have to increase the extraction of gas. When I have spoken about the crimes against the economy of Ukraine in the previous 30 years, one of those crimes was the lack of development of our own extraction of gas. We had 8 agreements on the further own usage of product. We have a KPI for Naftogaz on increasing our own extraction at least by 20%, at least this year and next year. And that is also our perspective of energy independence. So right now we are standing on we want to enter ENTSO-E, which is a European energy network, and we have gone through the technical audit already, so now we have some of the political issues with our European partners there, and we will join the European energy network, and there will be one of our steps to Europe.
Let me just ask you very clearly, how much of a setback is the deal between Russia and Hungary avoiding Ukraine transit, which means there's going to be a significant drop in revenue because the gas to Hungary is going to go via Serbia and Austria. That's a significant drop in revenue for your government.
That is the commercial data, and I cannot discuss the commercial data right now, but of course we are worried by this decision of Hungary. That is a sovereign country, and they have the right to make their own decision. They have the right for development of their own economies, and they have their own negotiations and agreement as well. But we are discussing it with our European partners right now. So if we are partners, then the partnership means joint answers to the challenges that have been in front of us. So in these joint answers, it is about our collaboration is being built on this, on the future possibility of collaboration with Hungary, with other neighboring countries that are currently searching for the questions and searching for the how to answer the challenges on the gas crisis.
Because we've seen, it's very clear the ambitions you've got industrially, for IT in particular, but hydrogen is offering a significant breakthrough in the coming years, even though the technology is not yet 100% as we're seeing in the COP26 process. What is your ambition? Because your foreign minister made clear that green hydrogen is a big political project and a serious tool for Ukraine's further European integration. Is that being over-optimistic?
Це оптимістично.
That is optimistic. That is an optimistic project, and it is an optimistic project on the production of hydrogen in Ukraine. And not a lot of countries have these opportunities for the production of hydrogen. Ukraine has this opportunity, and now Ukraine is included as a potential partner in the agreement between European countries on producing and joining this alliance on producing hydrogen in Ukraine. Ukraine has already had these first steps. The businesses has already responded to that, and we have the first contract on producing the 100 megawatts of hydrogen a year. So we are building this project overall, and it's going to be a state strategy on producing the alternative energies. The production of hydrogen right now is becoming the strategy, and Ukraine is going to be joining this strategy. But I would like to tell you the following. Ukraine has a great ambition on the green shift and on the big Green Deal. We have signed all of the needed agreements. We have signed the national plan on the decrease of the emissions, and we have now signed the additional commitments in the Paris Agreement and the National Plan on Decreasing the Emission. We have an ambitious goal, 65% decrease compared to the 1990. So when the businesses ask us, and there's a lot of questions, how will we reach that? And Ukraine will require additional investment to do that. With our calculations, around $10 million in 10 years, $10 billion in 10 years. That is a global strategic calculations. We will need to have additional calculations made. But overall, in our conversation with John Kerry, and by the way, we're going to have a very broad conference in Glasgow, when Ukraine is going to be represented as the partner. And John Kerry has informed us that the US are going to be participating in this kind of international fund on this green shift and green transition, and they're going to be all fulfilling this fund on the level of the $1.3 trillion. And this is going to be the investment part, and Ukraine is going to be participating directly in this investment part as well. We have spoken about the European Investment Bank on the opportunities of the significant investments on the level of $7 billion, and European Investment Bank is ready to get that through the green transition in Ukraine as well. And we have money for that as well. We have a lot of that. There's a long money, and they have the business foundation under that. So we have to get back to the state the public-private partnership. And there is another element that has been lacking behind in the first 30 years of independence, and we have been working really actively on that. And we are now looking for the very effective way of investing money on the level of the businesses and on the level of the state, because this is one of the elements that works really effectively today. I want to take a step outside of the energy topics and want to tell you a little bit about the business collaboration, because it's very interesting for the businesses. And starting with the difference between the agreements of the joint excavation of Ukrainian gas, those crimes, economical crimes, like the lack of the autobahns and the biggest along the territory of Ukraine in 30 years, that is a crime basically, when you don't have this really fast roads. We have started this work, and I'm sure that for the first autobahn from Krakowec, that is on the border with Poland, to Lviv, to Rivne, we're going to have the first autobahn going on. All of the bureaucracy things have been completed, the feasibility studies have been completed, the traffic has been started, we have the potential designers and project developers there. So we're working on that really actively. What is very important, the whole legislation base has been approved that will help us to do that. After this project, we have already known that the 5 next projects of constructing the autobahns are going to be planned as well, with the people who have already expressed their desires to support that. Again, we are working on the exchange market. We're going to be working on the updating of the pension system. And we have said it as well. Ukraine hasn't managed in these 30 years to provide the second level of the pension system. And we can speak about the opposition to the changes. Everybody knows that we have to do that. But when we're saying in what way it's going to be done, who's going to be paying for that, who will be responsible for this income to the pension fund, it is everybody says no. Business says no, the budget says no, people says no, but everybody wants that, and we understand that this is the only way for us to provide a good pension.
Can I just raise one other issue, please, because we want to take a couple of questions from the floor. The de-oligarchization.
Я закінчу про приватно-державне партнерство, якщо ви дозволите.
I will end up on the private-public partnership, and then I will answer to the questions that you would like to ask. The equity market is very important.
Час є.
We have the time, we'll talk about all of the things. Don't try to be very fast.
Все буде добре. Отже, накопичувати.
So, the pension system and the equity market. We have signed up the memorandum. We have signed up the memorandum with the European Bank of Reconstruction and Development, with USAID, with our international partners, in the context of whether we have the dialogue with partners and Ukraine keep on moving under our reforms. We will introduce the infrastructure of the equity markets. It has some time. We will introduce the new pension system that with a formula 1+1. So basically, from the individual income tax, we will take some part of the tax to the pension fund. We will have no additional pressure to people and no additional tension to businesses to create trust. We will develop the public-private partnership in other sectors of economy as well. It's very important, and the energy as well. Those are the important messages that I really want the businesses to hear as well. Another important moment is the reforming of the corruptional things. That's what we have spoken about, the anti-corruption, digitalization, and this providing the new legislation on the state architectural and design inspection.
Because the law has been passed, you've talked about the definition of an oligarch, but it's important because this is part of your relationship with the financial institutions and the credibility and confidence of international business. When the president says it is necessary to protect the country from powerful business who've, quote, corrupted its political system, why do you believe that the oligarchs do with it? Why do you believe they're going to be honest with you?
You should help me and maybe.
Why do your government believe that the oligarchs will disclose their assets and accept potentially being banned from financing political parties?
Якщо ви маєте на увазі
If you mean the law on the anti-oligarchic law, the so-called anti-oligarch law, draft law, the law on the people with the specific influence for the social and economical position in Ukraine. So that is a very important moment here. that this law does not go for you to disclose anything. This law does not provide you any kind of influences for the economy. We have the anti-monopoly and the antitrust legislation for that. We have the anti-corruptional legislation for that. This law creates the social right to life, when people should live under certain framework, under certain rules. So that is what this draft law is creating. That is right now in the parliament. This is what this draft law is currently creating. It gives the opportunity to create the new rules that are going to be very bad for the people who are called oligarchs in Ukrainian society. And you can make a choice. You can go to become a large businesses, as it happened in a lot of different countries, or you can leave the status for yourself and live under the certain framework, under certain rules and some limitations. But that will be at least a just thing to do, and it will be understood by the society, and the society will understand that. But the key things about that is building the anti-corruptional infrastructure in Ukraine and investment infrastructure in Ukraine, because Ukraine is the first country in the world that has such an open system of declaring your incomes as the public offices. The only country. There's no other declaration system in any other country. That very complex, big system doesn't exist anywhere else. We currently have one of the most developed infrastructure of the corruption, fighting corruption. So we have 7 anti-corruption institutions. We have been creating it with our international partners. We have the legislation in the form of that it has been recommended by the Venice Commission, and it has been recommended by our international partners as well. So saying this, when in this room we've had this element of applause, that was what I was talking about, because we're moving in the fastest pace by making those legislative changes that haven't been approved and hasn't been made in Ukraine in decades. We're changing the country. We want to change our country, and we really want to take the corruption down. And I will just finish what I wanted to finish that is important and interesting for our businesses. Today, when we are speaking about the state architectural and design inspection, we have closed it. We have created a new institution, the state inspection on the city design and the urban build construction. Right now in the parliament, we have the 2 projects that create the new rules for working on this market. Unlike this register that used to be on the foreign servers and has been managed by the corruptional people, and we had the corruptional people implemented directly into the things. And this was the tremendous level of corruption. Today, and we have 2 more additional draft laws on the criminal liability for the subjects who work in the design and construction sector. It's very important as well, and you understand that everything that has been done, and this is fighting corruption in the legislative field as well. An important moment is digitalization. Everybody knows about DIA, and it is just the top of those changes that Ukraine has made. And right now, Ukraine is, and I would like to say that Ukraine is now the leader of digitalization in the world. By the end of the world, we'll create the paperless state, and this is a direct fight against corruption, because computer cannot be bribed. By the end of the year, we'll have a paperless state, which is very important as well. We'll have the transparency and change and the right design of the state registers. We'll have the unified social register, the unified demographical register. That will the reforms that will change the state, and those people who knows that and understand that, I'm sure you will appreciate that. And we will all appreciate that when it will all start working, because that will give us an opportunity to have a different social standards, to have a different way of appointing the economic and macroeconomical forecasts. When we have a unified demographical register that has been digitalized, and we understand the country we're living in, we understand the resources that we have, and we will calculate the indicators in a different way. We didn't have a census till to year 2000, we don't know how to calculate the GDP per capita. And it also creates a certain problematics and challenges for the economy of our country. So those things in the digitalization that we're working on, they are very important. And they're the ones that are going to change our country, reform our country, and that will take the corruption from our economy and from the relations between state and the business.
Is up. We've overrun, so thank you very much indeed, and I wish you well. These are complex times, not just in Ukraine but elsewhere, as we're seeing across Europe, as we're seeing in many parts of the world. So many thanks indeed for making time this morning, and we're going to talk immediately about the economy of the 21st century, an era of change in this complex environment. So thank you very much indeed.
Дякую дуже вам. Можливо, є
Thank you very much. Maybe we will have some questions from the audience, from businesses. I would like to talk as well in this interactive dialogue.
Just wait. I've been told you need to go. Do you?
10
But you
хвилин.
haven't told me
Дайте
that.
мені поспілкуватись з бізнесом і з людьми. Є така можливість. Я буду
Give me the opportunity to talk to the people.
I need guidance. Do you want me to ask questions or not? Someone has got the microphone already. Where's Yuri? Yes or no? Fine. Okay, we have questions. I was planning to go to questions, but I was told your schedule was tight. Please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Шановний пане прем'єр-міністр,
Good day, Prime Minister. My name is Inessa Kardigara. I am the deputy of the general director of the Tatra Yuh company. We have been creating the Ukrainian carriages, and I would like to say that throughout this 28 years we have been investing to Ukraine as well. We have been creating new jobs and paying the taxes to Ukraine as well. The question that I have, that right now in the times of the corona crisis, we have a lot of governments that have been considering the plans of restoring their position through the corona crisis, and there is the money for the support of the public transport, and the renovation of the public transport has been invested as well. We have the rescue plan in the US, and there is the Trudeau plan with the $15 billion. European countries also follow the same template. In Ukraine, as you know, there is no state financial support for the public transport. And I have an offer, maybe you should add up to those crimes that you're collecting, definitely. Maybe there is a crime as well that you might solve. Are you planning to finance the public transport? And if you plan to support the development of public transport, so maybe yes, well, you will give the priority to the state, to the domestic producers.
Line another microphone up, please, with somebody. Go ahead.
Дякую за ваше питання.
Thank you very much for your question. Well, the first thing, the $400 million is about 12 billion hryvnias from the European Investment Bank. There is an offer that is available. You know about this project, the support for the municipal transport. Today, I don't know with you or maybe with the people from your company, we will have a meeting by the end of the day, and with the producers of the municipal transport and public transport, a very relevant question indeed. The government and the local municipalities that are partly collaborate in this and directly supporting that financially. And the development of the municipal transport in Ukraine. Of course, it is very important for us to create the new jobs, not only in the sector of the public transport, in the aircraft construction, in other sectors that give a lot of good economical multiplicators and create a lot of jobs. We have to speak about synergy here, and we have to speak about the public-private partnership, the synergy between the municipal and state budget. Of course, we are providing the money to support Ukrainian producers, but it is important that the direct financial support from the budget is not available for everything. So we have to find the joint ways to co-finance it with our international partners, with the local budget, and with the private businesses as well. So it is very important that that we provide this opportunity, and in tender offers in Prozoro it has been already set out. You know about these things. We have the life circle of the product, when the local governments there can also analyze what is going to be the overall lifespan maintenance. That is an important thing for the municipal transport, because the maintenance takes a lot of part of it. The localization, will you consider that as well? Yes, the localization will consider as well, but what do you mean under localization? If we speak about the localization in the legislative sphere, then it is very important to speak about the support for our producers throughout the indirect methods. So when we're saying that the domestic producers, they have less expenses for the services, they have less opportunities to create new jobs, those are those indicators that we can include. Because if we speak about the localization as closing down the market, it is the wrong way to do. Because there are two different approaches that currently have the differences in politics and economy. People say close the border, do not let everyone go, let the domestic market develop. It is impossible to do that. We have a lot of international agreement. We have an association agreement. We cannot close down from the other world. But localization, this philosophy to support your domestic producer is our main deal, is our main obligation. We will support that.
Who's got the microphone, please? I don't know where the microphones have gone. Help me, please. No, can we do it over here, please?
Пане прем'єр-міністре,
Prime Minister, the question from the Nexel Holding, Volodymyr Lavrenchuk. Nexel Holding has already invested in Ukraine and it's invested into big projects, and we're now considering investing an opportunity to invest into concrete and the construction sector. We have already spoken about the climate change and the change of businesses and the business policies, as well as, the state is changing, the business are changing. It's very good that the government knows about those changes happening. But I would like to clarify the question, and maybe you will give us more clarity to that. Starting from 2026, the European Union is planning to set out the cross-border carbon tax that will definitely influence the economy of the several sectors that we might call the carbon-intensive economy sectors. So except for all of those programs that you have said, and especially speaking in the position of the existing companies, is there any support of the state possible to go through this transition period after the introduction of the carbon tax in 2026? Thank you very much. With the signing of the Paris Agreement's amendments, and we have taken the obligation, the commitment to decrease by 35% to the level. So we don't have a lot of left. We only have 38% left to take it to the needed level. So this is one of those steps that is not going to be providing the Ukraine the opportunities to avoid this cross-border tax. So basically, there's not a lot of steps that we have to do now to have this free space of trade in this measure. Ukraine is ready to invest money, and right now we are investing money together with our partners 50-50, with the Energy Efficiency Fund is one of the first examples that we have. And then, of course, after the creation of that, I do hope that in Glasgow we will have a global resolution of how the world is going to be moving further in decreasing the overall carbon emissions, and we will understand what will be the partnership, what will be the financial offers that will be provided to the participants and the signees of the Paris Agreement, and especially for those who have taken the most ambitious goals, and we are taking one of the most ambitious goals for our country. Even though we understand that will not stop the economical development, we will then understand what is the resources that we have. I have already said that in the conversation with John Kerry, we have a tremendous resources that they have been evaluating in trillions the money that will be provided to this global fund for decreasing the carbon emission. We will be developing the hydrogen technologies. We will have the alternative technologies as well on producing electricity and accumulating energy as well. It will all be included there, and this is what we are looking for. Of course, there are expensive technologies today, but please recall how fast the solar panels have gone into our life, and to see how the pricing has changed for the photovoltaic panels. And you can remember that the prices was really high, but then it decreased. So we are sure that the modern technologies and the accumulators and the batteries for storing the electricity, they're going to be declining in prices, and the technologies will become more available and accessible and cheaper. Right now we're financing through the state and through the European Investment Bank We are financing, and the World Bank has also joined that. We are financing the buildings of the hydro units, and we have now opened the 4th hydro units at the Dnipro hydroelectric station. And this is a colossal battery when you can store the electricity during night, and then you will provide it to the grid during day. So this is a very simple question, that the really simple system that works, and it's important for the Ukrainian capacity, and it is green technology, speaking on the carbon emissions. So those technologies are going to be supported by the state and going to be financed. The global answer we will have in November, after we will have the agreements with our partners. Thank you.
All right. Could I just tell you that while we've been sitting on the platform, the British National Grid has announced there are going to be blackouts in the United Kingdom. So don't think you are the only country with challenges. Very good to meet you. Bye-bye. Ladies and gentlemen, we're 25 minutes longer than we planned. I'd like to invite the next guests up onto the platform, please, to discuss the economic changes and opportunities which are coming down the track. Would you like to come up, please? And would you like to change the chairs? I wonder if there's anyone who would like to change the chairs for me.
Я не знаю, чи хтось мені допоможе поставити ще більше стільців для панелістів.
Шановні пані та панове, прямо зараз відбувається
Dear ladies and gentlemen, we have a very brief technical break right now, but in a couple of minutes in the main stage we're going to start the panel discussion, Economy of the 21st Century, the Age of Changes and Opportunities.
I'm sorry.
Пані та панове, залишайтеся в залі.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stay in this room. We are about to start in a couple of minutes.
Пані та панове, ми запрошуємо вас до зали, усіх тих, хто вже встиг.
So, ladies and gentlemen, please get back to the room, because right at this moment at the main stage we're starting the next panel discussion, the economy of the 21st century, the age of change and opportunities. So please take your seats.
Пані та панове, прохання.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Take your seats. We are about to start our first panel. We're about to start our panel, Economy of the 21st Century, the Era of Changes and Opportunities.
Sit in the front, sit in the middle. Yeah.
Yes, I'm a Minister of Digital Transformation, and Vice Prime Minister.
Michal, make this feel like a conversation, please. Okay. No great big opening remarks or anything. Okay. I want for you as an entrepreneur and a minister.
Пані та панове, прохання.
Ladies and gentlemen, please do take your seats. We are about to begin. Let us give a round of applause to our distinguished speakers.
You're back. Let's continue. Sorry for the interruption there. We were hoping to move it a bit faster, but obviously the Prime Minister stayed much longer than expected, which was great for you. But what it means is that the time has shifted. So what you've seen is this morning from the Prime Minister is much greater access than I think we were expecting. But interesting for me that he is not prepared to yet commit, that he and his government have convinced the World Bank and certainly the IMF that there'll be a new tranche coming of 750 billion by the end of this year. You will take your own conclusions, but he paused for rather a long time. We're going to make this last an hour rather than an hour and a quarter, but what we want to do is talk about the economy of the 21st century. It really is an era of change and opportunity, but look what's happening. Janet Yellen in the United States is struggling to keep the government afloat. The US has been down that track before, but running out of money. Yes, running out of money. You know the kind of energy roller coaster we're on. 10x for gas prices until President Putin's announcement yesterday, but who knows how long that will last. And it still leaves prices way up, maybe 6x or 7x above where they were just literally a few months ago. We've got inflation threatening in a big way. We've got a massive recalibration of the jobs market, of jobs vacancies, of job demand, of what people want to do, particularly after the pandemic, the decisions they are taking about their own lifestyle as well. The Economist yesterday posted the following. Is the world economy going back to the 1970s? And they started talking about stagflation. And they underscored, and this is what I want to get into with the panelists, they underscored that the past is not the best guide to the present. I'm doing this big work about thinking the unthinkable or thinking the unpalatable. It's about how much all of you are thinking in different ways about the way things are going. Quite apart from the Ukraine national situation, it's about the context, the geopolitical, the geo-economical context in which you're all operating, and the fact that much of what you've taken for granted is simply no longer relevant. And let me put to you that with the climate emergency, and the Prime Minister just talked about it, one of the questions was about carbon, and it came up in the video as well. With the climate emergency, much of what you take for granted is going to have to change because of the consumption of hydrocarbons and the way we run our lives. I've been struck, if I may, I've been coming here one way or the other for 30 years, the enormous traffic jams in KIEF this morning, even bigger than when I was last here 2 years ago. So there's a materialist ambition, which is inevitable, but can the planet survive and can the planet afford it? I put those things to you because it's about thinking very radically in all of this. Let me introduce who is joining us. We have two joining us, as you can see in the top right-hand corner. We have from London, Anne Cairns, who's Executive Vice Chair of MasterCard. Good morning, Anne. We also have Chandran Nair, who's founder and chief executive of the Global Institute for Tomorrow. Chandran, lovely to see you. You're joining us from Hong Kong to give us the Asian perspective. And here on the platform, we have Minister Mikhail Fedorov, Vice Prime Minister, Minister of Digital Transformation. Welcome. But you are, I would say, a young progressive. You've been in business. You know what life is like at the cutting edge, quite apart from the business of being in business in government. We also have Henryka Bochniarz, welcome, founder and chairwoman of the main council of the Polish Confederation Leviathan, and that's an association of private employers, a former Minister of Industry and Trade, and also restructured and privatized 7,000 companies during her time. But your CV is so long that I'm not going to read it out. Otherwise, we'll be here until lunchtime, just reading your CV. And finally, not finally because I'm making a value decision, but I want to come to you first, Grzegorz Kolotko, Professor of Economics, Director of TIGER, Transformation, Integration, and Globalization Economic Research at the Kosminski University in Warsaw, a former Minister of Finance in Poland between 1994 and 1997, when, of course, Poland was going through dramatic changes. And I should tell you that I was in the shipyard strikes in Gdansk in 1980, and seeing what's happening in Poland 40 years on is quite remarkable. But Anne, I'd like to come to you very first before I go to Grzegorz, because what you do at MasterCard, and you're a partner of this, this conference, you have an extraordinary amount of data about how people are spending their money and what changes there are in spending habits and willingness to spend, quite apart from the fact that people don't want cash anymore, or most people don't want cash. What kind of conclusions have you been drawing, not in the last 10 years, but the last 10 weeks and 10 months, about spending patterns, which could very much influence the kind of discussion we're going to have here about the era of change, but also of opportunity? What at MasterCard are you concluding about the way people are spending money anywhere, whether it be the most developed countries or the least developed countries?
Well, thanks, Nick. Yeah, we do have a lot of data, and the reason for that is that we reach about 3 people on the planet with our products and services. And of course, as you mentioned, there's been a huge switch from cash to electronic, and such a big switch that in 10 weeks of last year, we saw a change that we hadn't seen in the previous 5 years. And of course, that switch was to buy online, and that's to be expected because people are living in their homes. But also subsequent to that, we've seen people actually supporting their local community, buying products and services within 15 minutes of where they live. So it's a combination of global and local happening all at once. And out in the developing countries, what we're seeing is people thinking about bringing up digital identity so that they can pay their citizens. Since the COVID crisis, about a billion people have received payments from their governments, and we think that that will continue. And to link it through to things like climate change, what we're seeing in places like Africa are people buying things like small solar panels that they can put in their homes and paying for these using their mobile phones on a pay-as-you-go basis. So linking payments to things that generate electricity so that they can actually live their lives and be connected to the digital economy.
Do you think there is a new model emerging, or is that too dramatic to say at the moment? A new model of economic behavior or not?
Well, it's difficult to say at the moment. I mean, obviously, there are some countries where you have a lot of people with savings, and there's pent-up demand to spend, pent-up demand to do things like travel, which has been highly restricted and so on. So from a consumer behavior point of view, you've got a couple of things that are happening in the economy. But I think one of the biggest things that we've seen is also what's going on in the supply chains around the world, because the supply chains are extremely disrupted. And I think it could be a time that in trade finance and so on, that you see the development of a whole new model. And this will actually relate to the things that you discussed, such as climate change.
But the main thing you're saying is everything is moving very fast and almost in surprising ways, in ways which possibly even you at MasterCard had not been expecting or predicting.
Yes, it's moving very fast. I would say that the COVID crisis has accelerated digitization. We're now staring into a future with 5G, artificial intelligence. The Chinese are pressing ahead with digital currency. So there are many different moving parts, open banking's opening up around the world. So I think in the finance sector, we're seeing incredible speed happening.
Right.
Of course, on top of that, in the gas sector and so on, you've got algorithmic trading, you've got the volatility of the gas prices, you've got the clearing houses with all of the margins changing pretty dramatically in the last couple of days even. So yeah, we're seeing all of that.
Grzegorz Kołotko, you're the professor. You look at economic theory, you look at economic models. Do we have a model for where we are at the moment? There are many who say the models are bust. We've got to understand we've entered new territory for which there is no model to look back to for guidance. And that's why I mentioned what The Economist posted yesterday about are we going back to the 1970s, to stagflation at very high speed? Your quick view as a professor of economics.
No, we don't have any model. We have much more questions than answers, and definitely the future is neither to be shaped by inertia from the past, nor there is any determinism. It very much depends on development strategy and economic policies in given countries, and to a bigger extent than ever in the past on coordination between the countries. For that reason, we have to put some trust in forthcoming COP26 conference as far as fighting climate is concerned, or say what OECD is trying to do to fight money laundering, to control migration, and so on. So the biggest challenge for the future, which must be taken into account if one is Deputy Prime Minister or Prime Minister of Ukraine, Poland, whatever, Brazil or the Philippines, is how to find a place in countries' development strategy in this world, presuming, and that's in my model, that globalization is irreversible. Because as we know, some people more, I think, in politics than in business, but also in academia, they say, well, globalization is over. Make no mistake, globalization will stay here.
What is your view?
My view is that it is irreversible because of the good of trade, transnational trade, and the economy of scales.
But it'll be on a different basis, because we're even seeing containerization
I would say that everything is contextual. So when I'm taking a look on the map of the world, geopolitics, as you mentioned, geoeconomics, as you mentioned, I would answer myself being the, again, Deputy Prime Minister of Poland or Prime Minister of Ukraine, where we are. The biggest chance for Poland and Ukraine, here we are similar with all the differences, it is that we are at the same time, we more in Poland and you in Ukraine, a part of Euro-Atlantic sphere and Euro-Asian sphere. So we have to work as much as we only can towards business, politics, culture, etc., towards coordination of the policies with the West, but also with the East. If you allowed, and if there was a time, I had a couple of questions for the Prime Minister. I would ask Prime Minister, for instance, what you do to join Chinese initiative of Belt and Road and 16+1. I would like to see it 17+1, and it is a very weird figure that Ukraine is not in this initiative, especially since you need so much to invest in infrastructure. So the world of the future is not along any model, unless you would agree that it's a model of bipolar world. That is the world of the future. There won't be any leader. There will be the problem. There won't be any clash of civilization in an economic sense. But it will be not business as usual, and I'm also following the economists, and of course, the current situation is hardly similar to stagflation of the 70s.
Yet.
And therefore, it must be attacked in somehow different way. First of all, we have to pay for monetary and fiscal expansion when we were fighting pandemic, and part of the price has been postponed and now has come as inflation. And we will have to deal with the inflation for the time being, but everything will be done within irreversibility of the globalization. So was I'm an academic, was I a deputy prime minister, would I be a businessman? Each morning when I would start to shave, I would think, what is going on in the interconnected global economy, and what my small business, big business, transnational company in my country supposed to do to adjust to maximize what I'm trying to maximize to be sufficient, to be successful.
All right, Professor, thank you very much indeed. Let me tell you, you're aware that on Telegram, there's a Telegram bot, and you can contribute your thoughts, and hopefully some of the messages will come to me. And so I plan to open it up using microphones later, but I'd like to know who wants to say something. So can you do that through the Telegram app, please, now, not leaving it right to the end. Enrique, what's your view about where we stand? I mean, you've been working a lot on SMEs in particular. Do you think, particularly with the climate emergency and the scale of the emergency and what John Kerry talks about as the need for wartime mentality, that really psychologically most leaders, whether it be small company or big organizations, can actually come to terms with the enormity of what is happening, the enormity of change and the speed of change, which is why I asked Anne to just underline the scale of change that they are seeing at MasterCard with data.
Good morning. Thank you for having me here. And, when you open any newspaper or internet, whatever, you can find the titles, the life before COVID and after COVID. But the question is it really true that most of the issues that we are facing right now, they were there before COVID? What COVID happened to do to us is to accelerate the process, and showed us maybe in a very dramatic way where are the issues, and that we don't have time to wait to solve those
Should we say 18 years change in 18 months?
Yeah, that's right. And actually, I see several positive aspects. I saw, for example, in Poland, we were fighting, for years to make, the relations between administration and business, more digital. And the answer always, no, this is not the priority, we need time, we need money. And suddenly, during COVID, we did that just in 2 months. That, you can do most of the things. And the Prime Minister mentioned here that this is the program for Ukraine. And actually, I mean, that this is a must to do this, So we just have to follow the Estonia's case, How do they deal with the digitalization and making, the relations between administration and business more transparent, open, and this is the only way. So I mean that it's not that COVID was, I mean, definitely, the people, thousands of them, millions who died, and money that was spent, definitely there was a negative, aspect of that. But on the other hand, there were several aspects showing us that, for example, like Grzegorz mentioned, we can't escape from globalization. Maybe we moved too much.
Will it be a different kind of globalization,
That's right.
though?
Maybe we were too much dependent on China, right? And now we are learning our lessons, but I'm afraid that sometimes we can do this when I learned about, the CHIP Act in the US, with $60 billion spent on production on chips, microchips in the US. The same, in the European Union. So we just have to be more balanced, okay?
Well, let me offer you this, and I'd come back to the professor as well and all of you, but to underpin all your answers in the next 45 minutes, the speed at which adjustment has to take place, the speed at which mindsets have to change, the speed at which behavior has to change, the speed at which a realization of the enormity of change has to take place. What's your view?
I mean that a lot depends on, and that would be one of the issues actually that we are facing right now, which is more probably visible right now, the role of state, because in many countries, especially, in the countries that were far away from the creation of a big state, like the US or the United Kingdom, suddenly the state was an employer. Suddenly, the state sent billions in checks, so helped people to survive this time, helped the companies. So I mean that, we just have to discuss that and find out what would be the best way, and every country is different. So I don't think so that this is, one solution. It's different in Poland, different in Ukraine, different in the States, but definitely, if we are to accelerate the process to adjust to what happened with the COVID, we need to have wise, modern, very digitalized government. So to me, if we want to accelerate the process, this is what we should do. And another issue is that if we want to find good solutions, we have to have a dialogue. We have to look for compromises, because it's not up to the states, it's not up to the business, it's not just to, the individuals. We have to find a way, how everyone and every institution can participate in this process.
Well, let's go to the Vice Prime Minister, because you're in a government at the moment, you're of a certain age, but you've actually developed much of your experience in the business, in IT, in digitization. What are you seeing? Because just picking up on what Henrika's just said, need for a wise, digitized government, is that possible given the enormity of what is faced? We've heard from the Prime Minister already this morning, the enormity of what he's facing. But what are your reflections about the ability to change economic activity in line with massive structural changes, some of which have come from COVID, some of which, and I agree with Henrika, actually were coming down the track anyway. It's just happened much faster.
Yes, thank you very much, dear colleagues. There's a lot of information, interesting from our colleague from the MasterCard, first of all. But what we have seen as well, we have seen that throughout the pandemic, people have started to change their customer behavior. They started buying online, they're starting buying locally, they are supporting the local businesses as well. So what have we seen? It's about convenience. So basically, the businesses that are winning right now, if they are becoming more convenient for the users, for the customers, who have started to develop most during the pandemic, the tech companies. What do we mean by the tech companies? The tech companies are the ones that are convenient, that are overcoming the traditional business models because they are convenient and user-friendly. We can see that from Uber, from Airbnb, from Booking, how they have disrupted that. They are flexible and convenient for the users, and they're started changing the sustainable business business models that we've had before. So what does the state has to do with that, concerning that? Because, the globalization continues. I support you in that. This is something that will keep on going. What the state has to do in this case, the state should follow that, and the state should become a tech company. The decisions have to be made in the fast pace. There has to be zero bureaucracy involved. We have to have the total deregulation in place, and we don't need to have a lot of state in the economy. Then the state will be the function. It will be more flexible. It will give some certain vision, develop those sectors that doesn't have the business component to it yet. What do we see in the US, for example, in space exploration? Space is also the answer to the question what is going to happen to the climate in our world as well. We wanted to think out of the box. And if, for example, thinking out of the box today, I believed that industry and the other sectors of the businesses that have been negatively impacting climate, I do hope that they will be able to pass them outside of our planet limits. And the first countries who will do that, those are the countries who are developing, who have the GDP to invest into the strategic directions as the space exploration is. So I think the best task for Ukraine would be to make a task for ourselves to become the most convenient country in the world. And we can do it only through technology. Then we will be convenient, people-friendly. We will engage investment because people are looking for convenient conditions. And then we will have money for space as well, and for other sectors and important sectors of life activities. Strategic. But speaking of digitalization overall, the pandemic. And it turned out that before the pandemic, we had some political changes happening in our country. We had the team coming that supports digitalization, and we have had a tremendous leap during those times. And this leap in digitalization was possible because the consumption culture has changed. We now have more than 15 million users of the e-governance system, and in the ecosystem that hasn't been created before of that. We have launched a lot of things like the e-passport, the fastest registration of the businesses in the world. So we're starting to move in the direction of this overall mission and on those goals that we have outlined for ourselves. So I believe that digitalization is about convenience, and the convenience is the competitive advantage for the businesses and for the development.
You have your own experience before you went into government. First of all, you say out of the box. I'd put to you, there is no box anymore. That's the wrong definition. But secondly, what is your frank assessment of the ability of a state, of a public service, of civil servants to actually grip the enormity of change? Because, as you know, the World Bank and the IMF say there's still a very heavy state footprint, certainly in your country. What have you seen as an entrepreneur going into government, which makes you feel actually government can change to adapt to this enormous series of changes which are underway?
I believe that the most important thing is for us to understand who we are and where are we going to in a couple of years. The vision. If we'll have the vision, we'll have the people who will help us to implement this vision.
Public servants to people in government, because people in government tend to work in a certain way, which can be a bit slower than the corporate sector.
Well, yes, we have to have those, national ideas that will unite people around it. We'll have to build up the new quality for the public officers as well, and for the state machine as well. But I think that today we've managed to make, digitalization in a way of a pop trend. Because today, due to this innovation structure, we have the deputy on digital transformation in every ministry. We are already building the new public culture. All of our public servants, the top management, they understand that we have to make this decision with technologies as well. In what way you can make what you want to do cheaper, effective with the help of technology. That is something that is already possible for our government.
Ability to adapt or not?
We have no other choice. We either will adapt and understand that we have to change our mind frame and become the most convenient country in the world and think with tech, or we will not, or we will lagging behind the overall development of the progressive countries and we'll lose people.
Hong Kong, Chandran, welcome. The Global Institute for Tomorrow. Tomorrow keeps arriving, and it arrives at higher speed. You could say that you and I have been treading the same boards together. warning of the kind of things which were coming down the track. And I can't, rather like Enrico, I can't go through your CV, because again, I would be reading it for 10 minutes. But what's your impression about the adaptability of people? It's not just because of COVID, but because of the enormity of digital change, of the compression of the timelines, of the fact that stability is unraveling, and much that has been taken for granted for business decisions, for political decisions, is being challenged right around the world in many ways, including within the European Union. Governments are becoming more nationalistic. I'm just putting ideas in your mind here, because I'd like you to frame where you think we're going to be, not in 10 or 15 years, but maybe 10 or 15 months.
Thank you, Nick. And firstly, good morning to everyone in Kyiv. It's not often you get the chance to speak to people in Kyiv. So first thing I tried to say to answer the question about the 21st century and the title of this conference, which is The World in the Age of Sweeping Changes. I think we need to be very careful when we say a world of sweeping changes and not make it something that is a slogan that applies to everyone. If you're in China, India, Africa, Europe, it's all very different. So one of the things I like to say, and Nick, you've talked often about thinking the unthinkable. I've been struck by how we have, you have, and people have hung on to what the IMF and the World Bank think. Coming back to what you said about the economists saying that we can't go back to the 70s, well, the IMF and World Bank, take us back to the 60s. So I would say, we need to think very differently about the world we live in. And the point of having someone like me, I suppose, and I'm conscious of the audience in Kyiv, is to try and provide a slightly different worldview. So when we think about the world sweeping changes in this part of the world, then what you are struck by, and particularly living in Hong Kong, is the tension between the West and the rest of the world. The tension between the United States and China. So what I'm struck by, and as most people in this part of the world, I will not speak for people in Africa, etc., is the inability to accept the arrival of what I call a post-Western world. A post-Western world was not defined by what the IMF and World Bank think only, or what the economists think the worldview would need to be. So when I think of the world, and I think of a post-COVID world, I would like to suggest to people that we don't go down the rabbit hole that everything digital is going to land us in a good space. I think we're already beginning to think that, we need to have a very careful review of the fashionable view that somehow the world is digital. And often I try and remind people of a very simple thing, that human beings don't live on a digital platform. They live, in fact, on a biological platform. So when I think of the Asia Pacific and I think of the 21st century's economy, and to put in the context of people in Europe, numbers matter. Today, the Asia Pacific region has a population of over 4.5 billion people. In the next 40 years, we'll be adding about another 1.5 billion people. Just imagine that. So when then we talk about prosperity and change and opportunities, and given the wake-up call we've been given to COVID, I agree with you, we have to think the unthinkable. And in my view, that means redefining what do we even think about in terms of prosperity. So let me make 2 points, and then hopefully this will stimulate some discussion. 6 billion people in Asia. There'll be more people living in this part of the world than anywhere else in the world. This will be the most populated part of the world. Can 6 billion Asians live, or should they even aspire to live like Europeans and Americans? You don't need to be a rocket scientist to know this is impossible, and in fact, therefore, highly undesirable. The question then is, how do we deliver on a prosperity that gives them dignity, allows them to live comfortable lives, but not excessive lives taken for granted in liberal economies? And that is the big challenge. Therein lies the big question about, therefore, what does prosperity look like? And I would argue that we talk about a moderate prosperity. The Chinese have recently coined a framing around the world of common prosperity. So then let me end by just saying that you had mentioned the existential threat of climate. Well, we need to be intellectually honest, think the unthinkable by knowing that if we are to address the issue of climate, then Africans and Asians cannot consume like Europeans and Americans. It is not possible. We will have to redefine what their rights will be. This discussion about redefining rights and freedoms, including your ability to consume endlessly, which is taken as a human right in the United States and other parts of the West, will have to be challenged because we will have to price consumption in ways that restrict excessive consumption, which is added to the crisis we are. And therefore, the challenge, the sweeping challenges we think in the world, very much depend if you're going to be living as a citizen of India with 1.5 billion people, or a citizen of ASEAN with 1 billion people, the majority of whom don't have access to the basic rights. So I think that is the economic challenge, but it's not a challenge faced in the West. In the West, it is simply about how do we continue to maintain the levels of prosperity and increase them and continue the engine of economic growth. In the rest of the world, it is how do we give people the basic rights to dignity, housing, basic amounts of energy. But the numbers are so huge, they will have dramatic impacts on the world. And that is how I think the discussion about globalization, it's not about globalization. I mean, globalization is a factor of human history. The question is, what are the rules? And neoliberal economic policies of the IMF and the World Bank have essentially allowed people to imagine that globalization is something that will automatically enhance prosperity, but is based on a fundamental economic fault, which is the inability to price externality. And the carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases issues is just tip of the iceberg. So let me just stop there and say that is the rethink we need to have. And I believe that this part of the world in Africa will have to rewrite the script. And that will not be written in the West because of his inability to adjust to that new world order.
And just to pick up on that, if I may, the Dasgupta review before COP26 has said very clearly that business has not put a value on nature. And here we are 100 kilometers from Chernobyl. We know what happened there in 1986. But let me just quickly put this to you. It's not about thinking the unthinkable, Chandran. It's about thinking the unpalatable. How much do you think people really understand the enormity of the change which is coming probably much quicker than they ever imagined?
I think policymakers are in denial. From John Kerry to all of those to take up the podiums at COP, they are in denial about the dilemma I posed to you. 6 billion people cannot consume like Europeans and Americans. Therefore, and I'm being controversial here, the rights and freedoms will have to be restricted. Car ownership, how much gasoline they can consume, how much water. That is the massive denial. Thus, the fascination with things like, which are in fact non-scientific, slogans like net zero. There is no such thing as net zero, ask any scientist. And therefore, the denial is massive. And let me also say something that may sound controversial. You need long-term plans, and liberal democracies are unequipped, in my view, to deal with this crisis. Thus, the tensions between the state and the citizenship, who essentially say, we want to maintain our lives, you need to maintain it, we care about climate, oh my God, don't affect the price of gasoline. So I think everyone can see the irony. We're talking about climate change, but Joe Biden is at the same time saying, hey, please, more gasoline and cheaper. And that is not possible, and therefore the role of the state becomes very important. And we live in an era where we need draconian rules to curb the appetite of human beings to live out of sync with limits.
All right. What I'm wondering, Yuri or Alex, I'd like to get some views from the audience here. I can't see anybody at the moment, but I'm not getting any messages on Telegram. So could someone raise the raise the lights in here so I can at least see the audience. But I'd like, and I can see a gentleman here, but there may be someone further back. Alex, can we move the microphones around? Because I'd like to, could we have some light in here, please, so I can see the audience? The microphone here, I'll come to you in a moment. All of you on the platform, let me just pick up what Chandran has been saying particularly, and also what the Vice Prime Minister said, about the ability to adapt. What, Professor, do you think is the ability to adapt, given new economic realities? We've seen and we've heard from Anne Cairns already the way people are doing it because if they want to spend money, they're going to have to spend it in a different way through cards and through bank transfer. In other words, you as an economist having to realize that people are going to act economically in a very different way.
It's a very complex process, but it depends very much on institutions, but also on leadership, and also on education. I would start with an attempt to change the narrative, where we are going and for what reason.
But aren't events changing the narrative, Professor? Aren't events changing the narrative?
For instance, if you are Prime Minister of Ukraine, or Poland, or President Biden or Xi Jinping, stop talking about maximization of GDP. Start talking about optimization of Human Development Index, or inequality-adjusted Human Development Index, or environment pressure Human Development Index, which is evaluated on annual basis by United Nations Development Program, UNDP. Upon how you measure depends where you are going. I'm not sure does it make a rhyme in Ukraine. In Polish we say, od tego jak mierzysz, zależy gdzie, dokąd zmierzasz. How you measure depends where you are going. When we are maximizing GDP, and we are comparing what is GDP per capita in Ukraine, and it is only 1/3 of Poland, and Polish is 1/3 of Germany, this is the road to another crisis, what Chandra said about overconsumption. So now you have a couple of methods. One is Chinese, for instance, impose a tough restriction. Kids cannot be online more than 3 hours per week to play the video games by force of the government, by will of the government. And now you can start debate, is it correct or not? I think that each teacher with an open mind would say, basically, this is correct. But administrative measures, this is what we don't like. So the other approach is that the priest or the father or the teacher, we say, don't do that. So this is the matter of education, and this is the long shot. Answer your question, are we learning fast enough? Sometime, yes, especially when we are forced. For instance, by crisis of pandemic, we learned plenty of things much faster than otherwise. But sometimes it just calls for leadership. We have to bring to the equation the question, what quality of leadership we do have. And I am afraid, I do know this word, I cannot point to very many examples of a proper leadership up to the challenges. This is the very weak part, and for that reason I put much more trust now in the business leaders than in the political leaders, which is a pity to say so, but that is the case.
I was at a closed conference recently where a very senior civil servant said what needs to be done can only be done by politicians who are prepared to commit political suicide in doing it.
Not at all. Not at all. I heard it so many times, etc. First I was Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance in 3 subsequent governments. Somehow I was keeping the process going on, but if you are committed, you can convince the people that you are right. This is just stupidity, but what we often hear, that we know, I mean the politicians, they say, we know what to do, but we don't know how to win the next election.
I saw Chandran offering massive support to everything you just said. Henrika, let me pick up, and let me just, before I go to the first question, let me just take it even further, that actually there has to be a redefining of values and expectation, picking up on the redefinition, not of GDP, but of something different for measuring the way we are doing things.
Yeah, and actually you can watch this, for example, what's going on in the States, which is the perfect example of the liberal democracy, right? And when they did the survey, almost 80% of Americans, they supported the role of the government and the money they were getting from the government. And now, Biden's reforms, they are introducing something which is, for us in Europe, completely obvious, like paid maternity leave, right? So it's not just about, like Grzegorz mentioned, the GDP per capita. It's about, something that we are very proud here in Europe, which is costly, this entire system of social support that we have. So I think that COVID, convinced us that actually we just have to have a balanced approach to our life. It's not just about money, and sure, it's interesting the
so
data.
Different values.
Yeah,
different
that's values, absolutely. And I think that we in Europe, and especially in Central Europe, because we have, this combination, this heritage, which is sometimes very negative of the centrally planned economy and non-democratic system. But then we joined, the European Union, and we know what that means. That was, for us, completely clear that we want to live in a country of the market economy and liberal democracy. Now, looks like we are looking for a kind of, I can't say it's a convergence, but we are looking for another way, how we can spend the assets that we have here, on our earth in the best way. And without values, and talking only about money and GDP per capita and wealth, definitely it's not enough.
These are big changes. There's been a big project at the British Academy talking about the need about the future of the corporation. The future of the corporation is not to create problems, but to make money from solving problems as opposed to creating problems. Let me pick up with a few interventions. I would like to ask you, forgive me for not speaking Ukrainian, please be brief, because I just want to hear the kind of mix of what you'd like to put into this discussion. And Anne, I haven't seen your hand go up, but I will come to you in a moment if you'd like me to. Please. Microphone here, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Nick. I'll be brief. Andriy Tsimbal,
the managing partner, KPMG in Ukraine. I have a comment and a question to you, Mikhailo. On digital transformation, first of all, I would like to say that it's very important. We understand that the future is about, that's about the future. It's important that it has been done. We have heard Prime Minister saying that Ukraine is leading in this question. So first of all, I would like to express your gratitude for what you have been doing. That's important. But I want to comment about the risks connected to that.
Quick, please.
Yeah, I'll speed up.
In context of that, I want to refer to the CO2 research that has been done by our company, and among the CEOs of the biggest companies, and they have been outlining one of the biggest risks is the risks of cybersecurity. And I will just give you a quote. They just say that's not just the issue.
The risk of cybersecurity. Yeah. I'll come back. Keep that for a moment. Let me see what that gentleman would like, and move the microphone to somebody else, please. Yep. Please.
Yeah, I'll finish up.
Yeah.
I said brief.
Good day. My name is Vyacheslav, and I have a question to Vice Prime Minister as well. Mikhailo, thank you very much again for all of the good job that you've done. But the question is as follows. Can you please... Today, some of the people of Ukraine are forced to live at the temporarily occupied and temporarily annexed territories of Ukraine. The services that you provide, do you plan some innovations or novelties so that people could use those services on those territories as well? And are you ready to take the offers from their sides so their life would be comfortable there as well?
It's beginning to sound like a political press conference. I'm just going to pick up on that question as well.
I have the mic now. Yuri Gogotsa, киянин, який живе...
Yuri Gogotsa, the Kievan who has been living abroad for a long time.
Challenging into opportunity, like increasing prices for gas, independence on, say, energy resources to Russia, to developing green energy and benefiting from this and actually becoming a leader. What does the world and Ukraine need to do it? Like with electric cars, first they were developed to push electric energy, then people realize actually faster and more fun to drive here. Can we make it in general?
All right, thank you. So what I'm going to do is offer the first two questions to you, Vice Premier, and then we're going to open it up into the issues of the greening of what lies ahead, please. But first, cybersecurity, and then that particular question about your eastern part of your country?
Да, дякую за ваше.
Yes, thank you very much for your question. So speaking about cybersecurity is a challenge for everyone, and we have to work about that. 80% of time we're doing that in our direction, so we're working on that. It is impossible to build up any kind of digital state without the cybersecurity challenges. You know, people are spending time in space already, but we are still afraid of some simple cybersecurity issues. This is a challenge. We have to take it. We have to develop in this direction. That's clear. Speaking on providing the services for Ukrainians who are living at the temporarily occupied territories, we are already starting it launching. For example, we have this e-baby service that gives you the opportunity to have the birth registration there, and we're working on this direction. You can join us. You can contact our deputy because he's responsible for that. We want to take all of the barriers down for the Ukrainians who live at the temporarily occupied territories. We want to create them the opportunities to access that online. We'll create the best services.
On the green energy, and there's a gentleman there and another one here, so get the microphones moving around. But the greening, all of you, the greening of the future opportunities, do you think the penny is dropping or the euro cent is dropping about the enormity and the inevitability, the irreversibility, the imperative to green what we are doing? Enrica.
You know, we have right now a perfect example. I mean, that wonderful goal just can't work, because if you have a country like Poland that is completely dependent, 80% of the energy comes from the coal, right? And that is the government that has an idea of building 1 million electric cars. And all those cars would get energy from the coal. So, I mean, the question is, what's your priority?
But the miners in Katowice, where COP was 3 years ago, have accepted this have accepted that inevitability now, which is extraordinary.
That's why, I mean, that from this perspective, maybe, you know, this is for the government right now, no escape, because there was always an escape, you know, to find a kind of a play with the trade unions and, you know, not to do what was necessary to do to transform Polish energy sector. And now, because what EU is doing, and actually there is not much acceptance for that in my country, but we are under so big pressure that I hope that finally, you know, we will do this. Takes time, and the question is in which direction we'll go, because again, for Poland, probably we can't escape nuclear energy and, you know, small, probably, reactors, but definitely what's going on right now is pushing the government in this direction, and I hope that most of the people, they understand, yes, we have to do this, right? We have to do this.
What's your view, not just from Poland, but particularly the greening? We're looking at an era of change and opportunity. There are many who say that, particularly in Eastern Europe, who say they feel threatened by green because it's going to remove their jobs. So we're talking about a transition of building confidence to create new opportunities. So it's not about surviving, it's about thriving. Can those changes come through? It's not about using the word optimism or pessimism, it's about being positive out of all of this.
Yes, they can, and they do. I think that we are not in as bad situation as it has been showed, commented by especially media and some policymakers. We have made tremendous progress, and we will see another step forward at COP26 next month in Glasgow. Maybe this is the fun that so much happened due to this famous Greta Thunberg, not to the leadership of European Union or President of Ukraine or Prime Minister of Poland. But here, the engagement of NGO, independent media, academia, research, business, but first of all, political commitment. I'm a former policymaker. I was dealing with this case from different perspective, and sometimes we used administrative measures, but always associated with social security. You have to be aware, you mentioned Katowice, Gdańsk, to go to Śląsk. That is where our coal is mostly. When I was sitting at the round table in 1989 in coal mining industry, we had, the employment was 430,000 people. It was untouchable. Now there is less of them than 100,000. And there was a strong political fight. I had even across of my window from the government office thousands of miners coming to demonstrate against my policy. But first we have to provide a labor opportunity, alternative. It's a long shot.
But you think it's moving in that direction?
Yes, it is moving in this direction, and we do create very many new jobs. There is not a threat of mass unemployment because of green transformation. There is not a threat of mass unemployment because of the technological revolution, because new job opportunities are coming to the fore. And then we can cut the labor time, and we will do, which will create another response on the supply side and the demand side. So as for green technology, it calls for tough political commitment and the proper institutions. It is very difficult, you said just a minute ago, we have to contain our consumption. So presume that Mr. Klitschko is enforcing the law, that you cannot drive your car during the rush hour, only one person in the car. That would be another revolution on Maidan, because the consumer will not accept it. But maybe this is the solution. I know the highways in US where is the sign, $270 penalty for driving alone. You have to drive with somebody else. And there is adjustment, but you must provide also, and that is the public authorities' opportunity, alternative good public transport. What happens in very many countries, and from this perspective, you in Ukraine, we in Poland, unfortunately, we are lagging behind, but these problems do have the solution and they will be solving. And despite everything what has been said, the situation now is a little bit better than it was 2 or 12 or 20 years ago.
Thank you. Who's got the microphone? Please. Have you got the microphone? Who's got a microphone? Can you get the microphone to somebody quickly, please? Over there. And then the gentleman at the back. 2 microphones, please. Can we have another microphone?
Коротке питання.
I have a question. Uber, Dia technology, they're working with the 4G technology to have this coverage all over the country. When will we have 5G? And what do you expect? Not just what you expect, but all of the participants of discussion, because I think it's very interesting for everyone, even for the MasterCard, the 5G emergence. Thank you very much. Today I have been to another conference that has been dedicated to 5G. We have already started our research work on that, and next year we're planning to have the tenders open to have the frequencies between the operators of the 5G. Right now we're working with 4G. We had some troubles with that. We have 3 million of Ukrainians have had the first time 4G technology. We are developing the 5G technology as well. So next year we're going to have the frequencies on tender. I hope in 2 years we'll be actively start introducing the 5G technologies in the cities. In a couple of weeks in the unit city, we will open the 5G center where you'll be able to test out this technology. And how will we use it? I think first of all we'll use it for the industrial needs, the 5G connection, the big industrial centers, big cities, and then we will spread it to all over the country, because it's a different content and there's lots of peculiarities of how it will influence.
A massive multiplier everywhere, including in the rural areas.
Yes, it will definitely be an accelerator, but we have to resolve the issues with the 4G so that 95% of Ukrainians would have the access to 4G, and it will influence the digital economy as well, because 5G will mostly be accelerating the industry. First of all, the Internet of Things, for example, those directions. But we have to cover all of the problems with the Internet penetration, because it has a foundation for all of us today. Andriy Gritsanko, my name is the world is now developing in that way that one part of the society has been moving forward really fast through digitalization and other transformations, but the rest of the world lays behind, and they're not ready to take those changes and transformations, and we have no reasons to say that they will ever be ready to transform. And there is this gap in each society, in Ukraine, inside of the country, between the countries. It seemed like in these conditions, the elite should offer the joint efforts how we can prevail over this gap. But if we will analyze how the governments and elites work, they're not ready for that as well. And we have no reasons to say that they will know how to do that. If that's so I assume we're going to the big chaos. And I wanted to ask you about that. Do you see this gap building between the two parts of society? Or can you answer those questions?
You can hear the Ukrainian English translation. Is that right? Anne, can you hear the translation or not?
I can hear the translation
Okay.
occasionally.
All right.
I can hear it too.
Okay, what I'd like to do is just ask you, let me refocus that question, but with the same theme, about societal division. Are you seeing any sociological change in the way people are spending money? Because what has happened, in my experience, and you can see it, is that almost everyone is now using a card or using bank transfers. How has this really led to a leveling off of the way people are spending money and spending their wealth or whatever money they've got, rather than just digging into their pockets?
Okay, so I think that the greatest societal division is actually the division between men and women around the world. Women are very much excluded from taking their part in most of the world's big economies. And there's actually nowhere on the planet, including Iceland, where women are in an equal position to men. And the World Economic Forum have said that it's going to take us 250 years to get there. And we're losing billions to the economy as a result of this. So I think that the social contract is broken, and that business, civil society, and government need to look at this with all seriousness. Climate change. And businesses can't succeed in a failing world. And that's why you have companies like us saying things like, we want to reach the next 50 million SMEs, but we want to reach 25 million of those led by women to try and level the playing field. By the way, in terms of the SMEs, our latest data is that new companies have been forming at a rate of 1/3 faster in 2020 than they did in 2019. These businesses are springing up all over the world, particularly in places like UK, US, and Australia are leading the charge. And we know that the world's economy is largely driven by SMEs in many different countries. And so in actual fact, these small companies are being created because people are moving out of the more traditional labor force, and they're moving from bigger companies into smaller companies, and they're trying to survive in this digital economy.
Thank you,
they're
Anne.
adapting very quickly.
And that's actually been underscored by Minouche Shafik, who is the president of the London School of Economics, with an important book about the redefining of the social contract. And it builds on everything we've been hearing from the platform already. We're almost out of time. Chandran, you wanted to come in.
Yes, just can I quickly say, I totally agree with Anne about the women's issue, but let's also talk about the tyranny of essentially a Western-dominated world. That too is fully acknowledged, and that is the struggle we have. I talk about this in my upcoming book about the dismantling of global white privilege for sphere. But I just want to make 2 points before we end. The first is that, again, typically in all of these conversations, we say the world has changed, the pandemic has arrived, etc. But we then go back to what we want to do, which is we know digital technology, and therefore the future is all about digital technology. I will argue that it's very uncertain if digital technology is a net good going forward. And I'm not just talking about pornography, which is much part of what the internet is about, but I'm also talking about the ability of people to consume relentlessly without paying for the true cost. You can do it with an app. So the question is, I believe in technology, I'm an engineer by training, but digital for what purpose and what end? And therein comes the role of the state. And I agree with many of the things that the professor said. The state has a critical role. There is a myth, and perpetuated by business leaders, that somehow they're the most intelligent people on the planet, and those people working in government are slow, don't know what to do. That's not true. I will argue in the 21st century, the best and smartest people ought to be working for the government to restrain the excesses of essentially business leaders. Not because they are bad, but business doesn't do public and common good. That is not what drives business leaders. I live in Hong Kong, and I've worked with businesses all around the world. That is not what businesses are geared towards. So we will need very strong, capable states. And when professors said, you know, we need business leaders, political leaders, to stop talking about GDP, absolutely right. And we need the IMF and the World Bank to stop using GDP as the measure and the tyranny for measuring where countries are in terms of their rankings.
All right.
And I can say that, you know, President Xi in China has already talked about moving beyond GDP and using other metrics.
Right.
But technology to what end? And last point, China has essentially decided that the tech companies will need to be constrained. And they have done that, particularly with regard to the internet, with regard to education, and with regard to gaming. The state has to intervene.
So all of you need to leave here with the idea that there's got to be a revision of everything you take for granted. Let me take 3 more minutes, because I'd like to ask, first of all, the Vice Prime Minister, just to respond to that. Digital doesn't necessarily mean good. And then I'm just going to pick up on a couple of other points.
You know, I basically know that the main issue for the technology is the opportunity to provide the life, to make life more comfortable, and we will have a couple additional dimensions to that. When we will digitalize all of the services, then the offline centers of the service provision, they will be offline, but they will work faster because we will have an optimized, you know, back office and all of the inside infrastructure. So technologies is about making everything more convenient and opening new opportunities. Different people can use technologies in a different way, with different frequency, in different life situations. For example, someone is going to be, you know, working with their jet lag with the help of an app, and someone doesn't use that. It's just a very simple example that many different life situations can apply those technologies for the benefit of people. And we have spoken a lot, and we have heard a lot that we should not speak about the GDP, but you know, in our country we don't speak about GDP enough. You know, we don't have this 20, 30 thousand of GDP, so we could start talking about the GDP per capita. While we still don't have enough money for supporting our physiological needs, we'll still have to talk about GDP. We have 60,000 per capita.
Poland. Grzegorz, first of all, and both of you, Henrika as well, the future role of the state. During COVID, many people have relied on the state and assumed the state would step in order to save their jobs, but also to save the economy. Is that a significant, irreversible shift, or was it a transitory phase? Grzegorz?
Definitely the state will be the government, and governance cannot stay the course, but don't make mistake. Don't make the state the enemy of business. Look for a positive synergy, because the future, the art of the future, is to find an optimal way, which is contextual, different in Brazil, different in Nigeria, different in Ukraine or in Poland. How to combine the invisible hand of market with the visible hand of government. I was a government in this sense somehow. You judge it how successful it was, but I think that very much, to some extent. Nika was Minister for Trade and Industry, even earlier than myself in the government. So there was the market and there was the government. And bureaucracy per se is not an enemy of the people. It can be. But the question is how to manage. I'm from School of Business, Kazminsky. There's plenty of Ukrainian students, so maybe this is also our contribution to your development. Somehow we are teaching them how to be good in business management, but also in administration. So I don't like this discussion, how much of state measured by the share of output from state companies. State for me is first of all good regulation. The market must be regulated for a number of reasons we were talking here about. You know, market without regulation is a nonsense. It's an extreme neoliberal approach, and it's just a utopia. It's not even a theory. We can put a model into the computer or in the textbook, what is the free market, but market is never free, and there is never full competition, and therefore taking care of the proper, fair competition is also a matter of the regulation.
Right,
and the subject of regulation is the government. And my last question is about what my colleague, if I may say so, Deputy Prime Minister, said, that digital is always good and good for us. Take a look. It's not true. Because of this digital revolution, very many of you, instead of listening to what I'm saying, are texting. I'm not sure that this is the good use of the digital revolution.
No, but Gregor, no. But they're reporting what you're saying. They're reporting to other people what you're saying.
No.
They're proliferating your message.
Business people are not reporting. Journalists are reporting, and you know who else is reporting.
Enrica, very quickly, the role of government.
Coming from the business,
please.
yeah, but coming from the business and having an experience of my governmental work, I think that we have to be careful about the role of the business as well. And especially right now in the digitization, in the digital era, when you look at the big data companies, which are having capitalization bigger than budgets of many countries, you know, not small countries, and, you know, they can afford for, I mean, lobbying, legal, you know, aspects that they can provide, you know, in different governments. I think that we need transparency, and you know what happened, I mean, with the hearing in the Congress, in the US Congress, you know, showed us that actually to have wise government, wise people in the legal system who are able to be partners for the business, it's absolutely crucial. So it's, we have to look for a balanced approach, you know? And the new relations, and they have to be very transparent, because otherwise, you know, I am afraid that we can enter, you know, uncharted waters of, you know, the system which is actually not run by the governments and not run by the business.
All right. Well, thank you very much indeed. We've overstayed our welcome, but in fact, because it was a very rich discussion, and also because the Prime Minister's session went on longer than we expected, which was all good. So, Anne and Chandran, thank you very much indeed for joining us from London and from Hong Kong. Tomorrow is only tomorrow, Chandran. And Vice Premier, and also Professor Kolodko, and also Henrika Bokniaz, welcome. Thank you very much indeed. I've enjoyed enormously your contributions. I would urge you not to talk about optimism or pessimism, but being positive from what you've heard, and positive from the ideas that you've heard here, because change can be positive and needs to be positive. It doesn't have to be viewed with foreboding, even if it's unsettling. And that's where we are at the moment. So thank you all very much indeed. Enjoy lunch. Thank you, Enrica.